Yo, what's up everybody, my name is Casey James and today I'm going to be doing a tier list on all the lineal heavyweight boxers. So we've got 38 of them and I've decided to construct this tier list, and as you can see on the screen here, we've got greatest of all time, legendary, captivating, alright, forgotten, trash and Shannon Briggs. I mean, I don't really know who's going to end up in the last one, but we'll see. I mean, I've seen so many tier lists online and I thought, why not do my own on boxing? So without further ado, we'll start off with the first ever recognised lineal champion of the world, which is John L. Sullivan. He had 2 defences, and back in the day there was draws were very common, so he had a lot of draws on his record. So I'm going to go alright. We'll go alright, I think. Just complete middle ground there. Next up we've got John J. Corbett, who is obviously the man to beat John L. Sullivan. Again, he's also someone who is, was a victim of getting a lot of draws back in the day, but his record's really bad. If I actually can see this, his record was 11-4-3, so 11 wins, 4 losses and 3 draws, which isn't really the greatest if you're a lineal heavyweight champion. So to be fair, I'm probably going to put him in trash. I can't really put him in Shannon Briggs because he's not Shannon Briggs. So next up we've got Bob Fitzgerald, and obviously the third man to become lineal heavyweight champion. So with him, he only had 1 defense, and I mean, does that really put him up that high? I mean, I'm kind of debating putting him anywhere above trash. So you know what, looking at his record, it was he had 61 wins, so I just put him at forgotten, because a lot of people who probably be watching this probably won't even know who John Fitzgerald is. If they do, congratulations. So number 4 we got James J. Jefferson, so the Triple J, and he was actually the first lineal heavyweight champion to retire. He did come back, but he was the first person to retire as lineal heavyweight champion, so it's kind of like it did confuse a lot of people of who is going to become the new lineal champion. And I mean, he came back after 6 years, so by then they already established someone new, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, I don't know how high I can put him as well. I think, let's have a look. You know what? I'm probably just going to put him at... I'll put him at alright, because I don't think he was terrible by any means. Alright, so number 5 we've got Marvin Hart, and to be honest, I'm just going to put him at trash, because I don't really know much about him. His record wasn't that great. Again, he was a victim of having a lot of draws on his record, and moving on. So next up we got Tommy Byrne, and Tommy Burns is actually kind of shares a similar name to my brother Tommy Hayburn, so it's kind of interesting. He's not going to get any extra points for that, but still, I think out of the 5 guys we've ranked, and this being the 6th one, he definitely posed more of a threat during the heavyweight division at the time. So with that said, I probably would put in either at alright or forgotten. I know no one's obviously hit the top 3 yet, but I mean, we're only 6 people in. Now, having thought of it, I think I'm actually going to put him at captivating. And you know why? Because this guy actually defended the lineal status 13 times, which is really good. I mean, especially back then, because the lineal status was kind of, it went back and forth quite regularly. But yeah, 13 defences. I think it's fair to say he was captivating. Okay, so next up we got Jack Johnson, and Jack Johnson was actually not just the 7th person to become lineal champion. He's actually beat Triple J, James J. Jefferson, when he came out of retirement, and obviously gave up that lineal status. I think it was James J. Jameson, yeah. Well, no, James J. Jeffries, yeah. So, I mean, fair play. He definitely has to rank high for that. In terms of how many times he defended the lineal status, yeah, 9 times, but a lot of them were by no contests or draws. So, you know what? I'll put him at right. No, I'll put him forgotten, just because it's the way he won it wasn't amazing, or alright anyway. Next up we got Jess Willard, and Jess Willard is kind of something like someone like Marvin Hart, who I don't really have much detail on him. He wasn't the greatest lineal champion. In fact, I don't think he had many defences. No, he had 0 defences, so I can't really put him any higher than that, to be fair, so I put him in trash. I'm not being harsh, by the way. I guarantee there are going to be people who are going to be in GOAT and Legendary, but just have to wait. I mean, we probably don't need to wait any longer, because it's Jack Dempsey up next, and Jack Dempsey, probably the first person out of this list that rings a bell to me, and will probably ring a bell to a lot of people, or the people watching this. And yeah, incredible fighter, had 5 defences, most of which were by knockout. Did lose to Gene Tully, who is obviously the next person to become lineal champion after him. Either captivating or legendary. He won 5 times, and even when he lost to Gene Tully, it was really good contests. So I'll have to put him in legendary. You know what? He deserves to be in legendary, not GOAT, but legendary, I think. And now talking about Gene Tully, the man who beat him, and Gene Tully is also someone who retired with the lineal status, but when he retired with the lineal status, he didn't come back. So I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because he had 2 defences and then retired, so the lineal status came at an end of his career. He beat Jack Dempsey twice, obviously, for the lineal status, and then in the rematch. So I think the fact that Jack is in legendary, I think Gene Tully deserves to be next to him, so I put him there. Now we have Max Smelling. I think that's how you pronounce it. And this guy, I can honestly say, the worst lineal champion. So Max Smelling, let me tell you a story about Max Smelling. Basically, he's the only person to win the lineal status by disqualification. He basically got punched in the nuts and was awarded the win by against Jack Sharkey, who would be the person to then beat him in the rematch. So easily in trash for me. Then we got Jack Sharkey himself, the man to obviously beat him. Did lose the first time, but lost by disqualification. Wasn't amazing, but I'll probably put him at forgotten, just because I would put him above the 4 guys we've put in trash. Now we've got Primo Carnera. I mean, last name kind of rings a bell for me, and 2 defences. He was obviously the man to beat Jack Sharkey, and yeah, I mean, I'll probably put him at alright. I don't think he was absolutely amazing by any means, but definitely better than a lot of the people mentioned on this list. But then we come to Max Bear, who was the man to beat him, but after he beat him, had 0 defences. He was definitely a brutal fighter. He had a lot of knockouts on his record, but as a lineal champion, he's trash. As a boxer, I'd probably put him at forgotten or alright. Obviously, I'm just ranking them in terms of their lineal status, not of their whole career. Because if so, I mean, Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney could be greatest of all time. We move on to Jim Braddock, who is obviously the man to beat Max Bear. Really, I mean, had 0 defences again. As I mentioned before, the lineal status back then was very back and forth. So yeah, definitely has to be in trash. I mean, we've put a lot of people in trash. I mean, that's the most popular one, so it's not a good sign. But now we get to probably, well, I can guarantee you now this is the first person going greatest of all time. Joe Louis. Joe Louis had 26 consecutive defences with the lineal status, and a lot of those wins would come by knockout. He'd hold on to that for 13 years. I mean, you see boxers nowadays actually having an impact from Joe Louis. I mean, most in particular probably Deontay Wilder, obviously with his name, the Bronze Bomber, coming from the Brown Bomber in Joe Louis, so definitely the greatest of all time. Alright, so now we move on to Ezzard Charles, and this was probably the first, I guess, shall we say, underdog to, because obviously Joe Louis was on an amazing streak, and for him to lose, it definitely was seen as such an underdog story. But in terms of how he did, I mean, he had 4 defences. I mean, the person that would beat him for the lineal status, Jersey Joe Walcott, and we'll get to him in a minute, beat him twice because they had a trilogy. He would beat him first in the trilogy, so I think he'll have to go. You know what? I'll put him at captivating just because he was the man to put a stop to Joe Louis, and I think that deserves credit where credit's due. And then obviously moving on to Jersey Joe Walcott, yeah, a pretty good fighter as well. I'm tempted to put him in alright. I think that's probably he's not amazing, he's not terrible, he's just alright. Okay, so probably another greatest of all time boxer coming up is Rocky Marciano. I think it's Marciano or Marciano, but basically Rocky was the only person on this list to retire the lineal champion undefeated. He's the only person on this list who is undefeated, apart from obviously Tyson Fury, but yeah, Tyson's still fighting, and Rocky obviously retired years ago. And yeah, 49 wins, 0 losses obviously, and yeah, I can't not put him at greatest of all time. There's really nothing wrong with his lineal status. So obviously with Marciano retiring, that kind of made another break in a lineal status, but Floyd Patterson would be the person to be awarded the lineal status, and he is also someone who is I guess a first on this list, because he was the first person to become a consecutive lineal champion. So he won, then lost to Igomar, who's the next person coming up, and then beat him again. Well, didn't beat him again, but regains the status. So you know what? I'll put him at legendary. Talking about Igomar, he's on this list. again, when he beat Floyd Patterson, it was probably seen as an underdog victory, and then he had 0 defences because he went straight in with the rematch. I can't really put him any higher than trash, I think. It's just, yeah, he just isn't that good. Next up we got Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston is probably another person that a lot of people will probably realise, probably most importantly because of who beat him for the lineal status, but we'll get to him in a minute. And yeah, Sonny Liston in his own right, that's probably his most well-known moment with the lineal status, is actually losing the lineal status. So with that said, I mean, did pass it on to the next person, Muhammad Ali, and I mean that there's no arguing where this man goes. I mean, he is the only person on this list to be a 3-time lineal champion, and he always had such an amazing presence in the ring. And I mean, him as lineal champion was just the cherry on top of his career, because obviously his career was just amazing in its own right. Obviously the fights with George Foreman and Joe Frazier definitely comes to mind, but yeah, definitely deserves to be at the top. Now, speaking of Joe Frazier, he's here as well, and yeah, I probably would rank him higher just because of notoriety, but in terms of his lineal status, he wasn't amazing, especially compared to a lot of people. I think he'll definitely be above all right, but you know what? Let's put him at captivating, because he definitely was captivating to watch. George Foreman, and definitely deserves credit, because this man is the oldest person to become lineal champion, but he's also become lineal champion twice. His first time was by beating Joe Frazier, and his second time was I think at the age of around 40 years old. He would come back and beat this man over here, who we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, it's hard to put him anywhere than greatest of all time, maybe. You know what, I will. I'll put him at greatest of all time. I don't really want to put too many people there, because it kind of diminishes the whole greatest of all time claim, but you know, he doesn't really deserve to be any lower than that. Alright, so we got Leon Spinks next, and he was the second person actually to beat Muhammad Ali for the lineal championship. Obviously the first was Joe Frazier, and this was also seen as kind of an underdog victory, so I'll put it at forgotten just because he didn't do much with it. Obviously he didn't have any defences. He went straight in with the rematch with Ali, and Ali beat him, so yeah, I can't really put him any higher than that. And next up we got Larry Holmes, and I'm not the biggest fan of Larry Holmes, but I can't argue with what the man did. I think when he beat Muhammad Ali, obviously Ali was at the end of his road, and that was very clear to see, but you can't really put him in any of the lower categories. I think I'll put him at legendary. I'll put him at legendary just because I feel like when he beat Muhammad Ali, like, Ali was already beat himself, so when he won, it wasn't like, oh my god, he beat Muhammad Ali, because it wasn't prime Muhammad Ali. He had many defences, and a lot of people probably think greatest of all time, but again, I don't really want to put too many people at the top rank of greatest of all time, so I'll just put him at legendary. So next up we got Michael Spinks, and this was also kind of a confusing time where the lineal status was kind of confusing because Mike Tyson would beat Larry Holmes, and people thought that was his claim to the lineal status, but no, Mike had to beat Michael Spinks, who's the person to beat Larry, and yeah, I mean, definitely deserves to be higher just because of his notoriety, but also didn't have so many defences, so I think if Joe Frazier's there, I think I'll put him at captivating, because he definitely was a captivating person, and I mean, Mike Tyson gave him his first loss, so I think with his lineal status before he fought Mike and lost that, he was doing pretty well. So, and now speaking of Mike Tyson, you probably think greatest of all time, but him as lineal champion is probably not what he's most known for, because when he did beat Michael Spinks, he only had about, I think, 3 or 4 defences, and then he infamously lost to James Douglas, which was probably, and still is, the biggest upset in boxing. And I can't really put, as a fighter, definitely greatest of all time, but as his lineal status, I'd probably just put him at legendary, which might get some shit, but you know, I think he definitely deserves to be higher as a fighter, but again, if we're ranking this in terms of lineal status, then I don't think he gets to that top spot. And then speaking of James Douglas, I mean, yeah, he's got to go trash, because he's not necessarily forgotten. People remember him for that moment. So yeah, I'll put him in trash. And then Evander Holyfield would be the next person, also another person who became a 2-time lineal champion, and the person to beat for that claim was James Douglas, which yeah, I mean, it was kind of a shame because we could have seen Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson maybe earlier. Okay, I don't actually know. Legendary or GOAT? He definitely could be seen as the greatest of all time. Definitely could be seen as the greatest of all time. This is difficult. Lost to Riddick Bowe the first time round. Those two had some great clashes. Then lost to Michael Moore. And Michael Moore, I mean, that was a big upset. I'll put him at legendary. I'll just put him at legendary just because he didn't have many defences, I'd say. I don't think he had a long time as lineal champion compared to a lot of people. Now we're going on to Riddick Bowe, who obviously had some great clashes with Evander Holyfield. I'll put him at captivating. I will put him at captivating. I think he was a captivating fighter, but yeah, didn't hold on to that lineage for a long time, but still had some great clashes with Evander Holyfield. Next person is it Mike? Yeah, Michael Moore. Again, was seen as kind of an upset victory when he won that, but infamously lost to George Foreman, who would become a 2-time lineal champion at the age of 40. So I'll go forgotten. Because he isn't really that recognised. And then we got Shannon Briggs. I mean, I made him his own little category. Not that I think Shannon Briggs is terrible, but yeah, as lineal champion, didn't have any defences. Won it from George Foreman, but then would lose it to Lennox Lewis in one hell of a fight. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But yeah, just because he hasn't been relevant for the last 5 years, or I mean, in the last 5 years he's been known as Logan Paul's trainer and the guy who has been trolling Klitschko. I can't really rank. Well, he's got his own category, so let's go, champ. Anyway, next one we got Lennox Lewis, and I might be biased because I'm English, but Lennox Lewis, greatest of all time, probably the greatest British fighter we've ever had. Only person. There's only 3 British lineal champions in this list, so if you've managed to figure out who they are, then congratulations. The first person to win it twice from Britain. Obviously there have been multiple ones, but he's the only multiple British lineal champion, and yeah, had some great defences, had some great fights, and I mean when he lost, or not when he lost because he retired with the lineal status, but when he retired, boxing kind of dipped, especially in the heavyweight division. Him being a 2-time lineal champion is because of this guy in Hasim Rahman, and yeah, I mean he basically came in with the mentality of knocking Lennox out, and he did it. He went out straight at the gate and just was looking for that knockout straight away. But yeah, I'd probably say he's forgotten. Klitschko now, as lineal champion, definitely ranks high, but that was such a boring part in boxing at the time. And I remember when I grew up watching boxing, I definitely didn't grow up watching the Klitschko brothers. Yeah, I can't really rank Vitaly or Vladimir even. Vladimir Klitschko. Yeah, Vitaly Klitschko didn't win the lineal status, but Vladimir Klitschko, I'll put him at legendary. I will put him at legendary, but just because of how boring that time was, and because he didn't fight his brother Vitaly, you can't get that greatest of all time. And finally, the current lineal champion in Tyson Fury. Now, we haven't seen how this is going to finish for him, if he's going to retire lineal champion once again, or if he is going to lose to Deontay Wilder or anyone like that. But definitely has to be better than alright. One of the greatest, if not the greatest, boxing comeback. Didn't beat Deontay Wilder, but you know, I do believe in my heart of hearts that he did win that fight, and I think he deserves to be in captivating. I'm tempted to put him in legendary, but I'm waiting to see what else is for Tyson Fury. But I mean that's my tier list of the lineal champions of the world. So hopefully you enjoyed, and yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and peace.